Okay. Hey, Brian, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Um, so do we, besides our presenters this morning, do we have anybody else who's new to us today? Don't think so. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started and got lots of stuff to talk about. Excuse me a second. There we go. Okay. So the agenda for today, we're going to do some updates and then we have a great presentation from Denise and her team in just a little bit. And then we're going to get an update. He's going to join for a little bit. We have a gentleman who's at ASU who's working on a workforce development grant and is looking for letters of support, partners, and so forth. He's only going to have a few minutes, so he's going to join us probably about 9 o'clock this morning. So that's kind of the agenda. I wanted to remind you all that, as you know, after the meeting, that I do send out the excuse me, the transcript, the video, um, the chat, and everything, so that you have that information. And then I try to capture everything that's talked about, as well as other kinds of things that are included in my newsletter, so that you have links, contact information, and all of that sort of thing. It's hard, and I guess the last thing I want to do is to remind you that you can download the chat at the end of the meeting if you choose. That if you go to the upper right hand corner, if you open the chat and go to the upper right hand corner, there's an ellipsis, three dots, and you can save the chat to your computer. So if you're anxious to get that information, excuse me, you can do that. So moving on real quickly, future programs. So just again a reminder, and hopefully I will actually get an email out in the next day or so. But on the 29th of August, we're going to do a public networks forum, and we're going to talk about what our public broadband network seems to become a very popular thing these days. I think I saw that there's like 600 or something in the country right now. And so we're going to talk about what is a public network, what are the pros and cons, different models, and so forth. We have a great lineup of people, and look to my email in the next couple of days about that. And then we're going to probably, I was just talking to Strider about doing a WeCon presentation possibly next week. So we'll let you, you'll hear about that shortly. And with that, let's just jump into Erin Lorando's the ACA Digital Equity Program Manager. And I don't think I've seen her yet, or she may not be here, is Kelly Crucy, Broadband Community Engagement Manager, to give us a quickie update on what's happening with the broadband office. So Erin, you're on.
Kelly is here. I just
Okay.
saw her. So good morning, Kelly. So not a ton to report. We are still waiting for our volume 2 to be approved. We anticipate that to be any day, but we don't have an update on that yet. As you know, there's about half the states yet that are waiting for that approval. So we're just in line for that. Not a ton to update on the DE front either. We are still working on our allocation for the capacity grants, the curing that goes back and forth between our office and the NTIA on that. So unfortunately, they're both just got pins stuck in them yet. And we, due to the fact that the volume 2 hasn't been approved yet, we are pausing on our BEAD related webinars and events due to the fact that no news is good news, right? I mean, there's nothing to share, so we want to ensure that folks have their, we want to respect people's time and not take it up if we don't have anything to update.
Is that you?
We do have our DE webinars, our regular monthly webinars scheduled for August and September. At this time, in August, we are going to be welcoming our partners at Local First.
Well, they say that shit just to
Yeah, I stand that.
Okay, Kirk, you're getting
Um,
muted. Okay.
in August, we will have our friends from Local First come to the DE webinar to share with us some ideas and best practices around being a subgrantee in a federal program, since we do anticipate a subgrant process as part of our digital equity capacity work here in the state. Again, we don't have timelines or anything for when that will open, just because that is contingent on NTIA approving our application and being able to, fully flesh out our plans and move into that next stage. However, we're still anticipating mid to late fall-ish. Please don't write that down unless you add the ish. Um, and so we will share those timelines as they become more apparent as we get our approvals. Let's see. I think that's about it. Kelly, please chime in with anything that I have missed.
So Kelly, a couple of things that I know you sent out an email which I forwarded to everybody with kind of a
Father, thank
timeline
you.
of things that are happening, but you might want to just talk quickly about that. And in particular, you've got a couple of events coming up in August and September. If you want to talk about those and anything else that you need to share.
Sure, sure. So thank you for forwarding that email and increasing our reach. We are planning for Northern Gila County in about 2 weeks. We'll be at the town council in Payson, and then we're also working to schedule a meeting in person with city and county nonprofits, stakeholders in the area in Northern Gila, and that's shaping up to be on August 14th. Then we'll also be visiting Yavapai. Those dates are still in the works, but we're looking at possibly Seligman and Clarkdale. And then also we need Pinal and Pima, and I will be reaching out to get those set up probably for late August or September as well. So a lot are still in the works. And then again, once we have that volume 2 approval, then we'll start working to get those webinars scheduled and some in-person forums for local government and ISPs. Those would be separate. And those are opportunities to come and meet in person and actually talk about collaborative opportunities for project areas, digital equity. There's a lot of opportunity. We're really trying to get everybody in the room together to look at maps, look at project areas, and talk about opportunity for how to really, maximize opportunity. And I think that's it for me, Aaron. I see there's a couple questions in the chat from Corey. Hi, Corey.
I just saw that too. Hi, Corey. Also saw your email this morning. Thank you so much. So let's see. I'm just reading while I'm talking, which is never good. Let's see here. Okay. So the interesting thing, Corey's question refers to the competitive grant that was recently released. The NOFA was recently released for that from NTIA, and so the challenges with the two different grants and the kind of overlapping timelines of them is that we want Arizona to show up well in every possible funding opportunity that is out there, right? So one of those is this competitive grant. And the challenges with it are, first of all, it is a competitive grant nationwide. And so there is absolutely no guarantee that there will be an award from every state or every region or anything like that. However, the pot of money is significantly larger. As Corey mentioned, they are anticipating the smallest grants to be in the multiple millions of dollars. And so that could do amazing things for organizations in our state. The ACA directly is ineligible to apply for that because we are managing the digital equity grants. And so other organizations in the state would be applying directly to NTIA for that. There are also different rules and regulations because you would be a direct grantee from the federal government. You would be on their reporting timeline and schedule and requirements and all that kind of thing, which, they're doable, of course, but they are significant, and the administrative burden on an organization is a real thing that I just got to point out. There is also a match component to the competitive grants. It is a minimum of 10% of the award amount is required for a match, and that can be cash and in kind. But it's just something to keep in mind, right? There's a possibility for a waiver for that, but no guarantees on that part either, of course. So definitely take a look at it. It is an amazing opportunity for organizations in the state. I have heard a number of organizations have been talking, but since ACA isn't in any way responsible for those applications or a part of that process, it's really honestly, it would be fantastic, Corey, if you just say like, "Hey, who else is applying? What's going on?" Right? Because you'll be getting you'll be getting straight from the potential applicant's mouth, right? You did see in the email that Kelly sent and that Steve forwarded that just for our awareness, we would love for organizations who are applying for that to let us know, just so that we can be aware of all of the awesome things that are happening in the state. But Nicole is here with us today too. Hi, Nicole, and dropped some information about the competitive grant in the chat as well. And there is an email that you can reach out to directly to NTIA for questions about that. They've also hosted at least one webinar so far about the competitive grant, and also watch the general space. I know there are other organizations like NDIA that are hosting informational webinars, just to talk about it from their perspective. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there. As far as your direct question, we're not directing organizations one way or another. We want as much money to come to Arizona as possible. So if your organization's work and the projects that you're going for have those larger price tags, it would be absolutely amazing if your organization is able to apply for a competitive grant. That would be great. I would love to see $5 million grants coming directly into the state, because that's that's a third of what the entire subgrant process grant is for the state. So that would be fantastic. But I think it's really down to the individual organization and what their capacity is, A, and B, what types of dollars they're looking for. And, you can apply to both. It just can't be the same exact project. So, if there's an organization that has a project or a program that would support a gigantic application, maybe there's a secondary smaller project that could get funded through the subgrant, right? And obviously keep in mind, as I've mentioned, the competitive grant is nationwide and competitive. So the subgrant process is within the state, and it's a local decision. And so those are some of the differences between them. And happy to go further in depth. I know it's a big, long document, and there's a lot of nuance to it. Not to put Nicole on the spot, but I am hoping that she'll be able to, fill in any gaps that I may have left there as well.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. So Nicole, do you have anything that you want to add?
Sure. So I put the program information in the chat. There's a ton of information for any questions you have off the bat. But again, this is a competitive grant. Awards are expected to be between $5 to $12 million for a 4-year period of performance. And if you read your NOFO closely, you'll see that $750 million of the $1.25 billion for the competitive grant is available this year, which means that there are additional years of funding in slightly smaller amounts that will be available, which will also have 4 years of performance. But of course, all eyes are on this year's, which is closing September 23rd. There is a tribal set-aside and a set-aside for U.S. territories as part of the competitive grant. And there, if you recall, there's a tribal set aside for the digital equity capacity
That's
grant.
pretty nice.
So tribal
I feel like
entities
the building we were
have
walking to is one I've been to a couple of
including,
times, so I knew where to go.
Arizona's
And
separate
this
agreements.
morning was a benefits
But
meeting,
there
which
is
is a
some
bit boring,
TV
but it
or
is week
something in the
one, so
background.
we got to get all the HR stuff
Yeah,
out
hold
of
on.
the
I'm
way.
going to find her and
And really just at
mute her.
Epic for
It's
like the
Kimber.
first 6 months, you're taking a lot of classes because there's a lot to learn. It's basically
Okay.
cool.
Where is she?
After class, we were pretty hungry, so we stopped at this little
There
shop
she
on
is.
the way.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's that's about it. There's a ton of information on these pages. NTIA hosted an informational webinar that was recorded last week. You can check that out. As far as who's going to apply, really I've got to just direct all questions to the digital equity page, but any political subdivision, state agencies, any form of municipal groups, basically anyone who's not the ACA, who's the current recipient of the other digital equity awards, Native tribes directly, foundations, nonprofits, corporations, community anchor institutions. Those would be defined in the statute, as well as what constitutes a community anchor institution, a local education agency, entity programs, and any number of partnerships with any of those eligible entities. So there's a lot to consider, and certainly the time is now to be getting those applications in.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Any questions for Nicole?
If I could real quick, it's not really a question, but the reason I bring it up is because we're chatting with a group called OATS that works with AARP, and it sounded like they were looking at a $5 million ask from the state's money. So when I talked to another group recently that had the same dollar amount, and it's like, well, if you're going for that much money, why don't you go for the federal money so that the smaller projects can use more of the state funds?
So I did add that to the chat, and I apologize for not naming that specifically enough. It is very unlikely that we'll be able to do subgrants at that size. The total allocation for this first year is just over $16 million, and that needs to run all aspects of the program, as well as maintaining the plan and doing subgrants. So, we might have a couple of grants that are, larger than average, but I doubt that many of them are going to be in that $5 million range, at least not in one go. So please pass that along to anyone that you hear saying that, because that will be very unlikely.
So Aaron, on your 16 million then allocated for Arizona that you will then be rewarding sub-grantees, does that take, what's the program time? Like that has to cover over a 2-year period, 1-year period, 3-year period?
So the total implementation time for the capacity grant, the implementation of the digital equity plan, is a 5-year period of performance. However, the state will be anticipating additional opportunities for us, for the state at ACA level, to apply for additional capacity funding approximately next May, and then the following May. There's a 3-year, 3 separate NOFOs to put out all of the capacity funding. However, some caveats with that is we don't know at this time what those second and third allocations will be exactly. And so when those allocations are announced, we will then be looking at our current status as far as, the work in the grand sense, and making decisions about whether those will be, straight sub-grants, will they be, to fund specific projects that are, that have emerged in this next year. It's hard to say what those exact plans are at this point. So this first year is we anticipate this is the lion's share of the capacity funding that the state will get. So we're kind of looking at this first pot as, we gotta get as much work done with this and support as much work in the state as possible. And I personally, this is, me, Aaron, talking, I want to put as much of it back into the community as I possibly can. That means more smaller grants, probably, you know, to spread the love around, as opposed to fewer larger grants, if that makes sense.
Got it. Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions for Nicole or Aaron before we move on? Great, thanks, Aaron. Kelly, you have anything else you want to add before we move on?
No, sir, but thank you.
You bet. Okay, so we're going to get some quick updates from Mala on, there's lots of stuff happening at the federal level. And we're going to get a quick update from Mala on several things: the E-rate funding support for Wi-Fi on schools and buses, E-rate hotspot loaner program, and the issue about USF funding for cybersecurity pilot program. So Mala, take it away.
Okay, thank you.
And you may
There's
have
lots.
anything else that you want to talk about.
There's lots going on, but I touch on. I don't know if you did this last time, because I joined late. But I'll start off with the hottest item, which is the USF funding, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal decision that came out on Wednesday, July 24th. And it was a decision, it was an appeals actually, that was passed down to the Fifth Circuit actually took a decision based on something that two other courts had already decided. The Sixth Circuit and the 11th Circuit courts, both of them found that the USF was constitutional. It was, and it was okay to go ahead with it. But the Fifth Circuit said that the USF fee is a tax and not a fee. They also found that they called it double delegation of authority from Congress to FCC and from FCC to USAC, and that violated Article 1 and Section 1 of the Constitution, where the legislative powers are all given to Congress. So they believe that that was violated. The majority opinion, it was 9-7. Okay. The majority opinion was that the telecommunication consumers are being subjected to a multi-billion-dollar tax that nobody voted on, which is not really correct, because this is a part of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And so it was voted on, it was agreed upon, but that's what they say. The size of the tax also is determined by a trade group, according to them, USAC. And it is staffed with industry insiders, and it doesn't seem to be accountable to the public, is what they say. But actually, the USAC board has public in it. It is only entrusted with administrative authority. The de facto rulemaking authority is FCC, but again, that is what they decided on. And so what are the next steps? You know, it's not going to affect us, the recipients of the USF funds, immediately. And by that, I mean not only the E-rate dollars, but also all of the other universal service programs, rural health, high cost program, Lifeline, all of those are funded by the same USF program. But it's not going to be it is not going to affect us immediately, because they will the FCC is seeking a stay of the court decision and bumping it back to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court already once bumped it down, saying that this is a local circuit court decision. So let's see what's going to happen. There is also, because of the dissent, I think it may not, the Fifth Circuit's decision may not hold water. So let's wait and see. Right now, that's all we can do. But it also then pushes FCC into looking at the USF funds more carefully, quickly. They take more responsibility in reducing the role of USAC in the USF collection, or make it more apparent that they are more in charge and not the USAC. But again, the decision has to be made quickly because the next quarter is coming up. September will be the next quarter deductions, or every quarter there is a decision made on the percentage of contributions, and the next one is going to be in September. So hopefully they are thinking very seriously about this and working on how they can resolve it.
Okay, Mala, can you,
So that is
we need to move on. So can you hit the other things real quickly?
Yes,
The Wi-Fi on buses and the loaner hotspot program.
yes. I'm not going to touch on the Wi-Fi for school buses. I think Mylan is here. He is probably better equipped to handle that. But the hotspots, I'll quickly talk to you about the hotspots. This is the learn without. I'm sorry if there is. I'm trying to keep my 6-year-old grandson quiet before he goes to school. But if you hear the noise in the background, that's him. There was lots of excitement about the Learn Without Limits in initiative that the FCC chairperson and chairwoman announced at ALA last year. Wi-Fi on school buses was one of them. The cybersecurity pilot program was another, and hotspot lending. I'll talk quickly about hotspot lending because that was the final order and report was released on July 29th, which was just 2 days ago. And right now, procedurally, we have to wait for the notice of rulemaking and comments, which is, and the comments are due by August 20th. So we're working on those right now with Shelby, with ALA. Hotspots are added to the E-rate program now, and they can be applied for through the E-rate program. There is a cap of $15 a month for the hotspot plan. So if your hotspot plan costs more than that, it's out of pocket. That is what the libraries and schools have to pay. There's also a list of what is eligible, not eligible, that they have published. I'm not going to go into details about it. I'm not going to go into details about the budgets that have been allocated again, because I'll put a link to this in the chat so you can see it for yourself. But there's a budget cap for the schools and libraries. Schools, it's based on the number of students. Libraries, as usual, it's based on the square footage. There's also a maximum usage per year, and that's a 45% in the first year, and the remaining 2 years, the rest of the money will be divided between the 2 years. Following that, there are lots of safeguards. Educational purpose, safeguard should be used only for educational purposes. Competitive bidding process should be adhered to. It shouldn't duplicate anything else that you are applying for. Record keeping of the usage and things like that. So lots of nitty-gritty rules and regulations. It will take a whole webinar to talk about just that.
Actually, there was a federal webinar yesterday.
Yes, you're right.
And I'll share the link.
Yes, if you would, that would be great, because that reinforces all the things that I have said. Back to you, Steve. I think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mala.
Yeah.
So just moving on quickly, because we want to get to our presentation this morning. Brenna, I believe you're online. First of all, if you and Elena, I know both of you are online. If either of you have anything to contribute to what Mala's already talked about, but there's at least two things that I'm aware of that you guys are directly involved with, which is the ACP, Secure and Affordable Broadband Extension Act, that you might want to talk about, and then the Kids Online Safety and Privacy Protections Act. And I don't know if you have anything else that you particularly want to talk about. So Brenna, should I turn to you, and then Elena, or leave it to you guys?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Brenna. Yeah, and Elena, you can chime in. I can just give a little bit of an update. The Kids Online Safety and Privacy Act, it's a combination of two bills previously that have been in Congress for a while, but that passed out of the Senate. So now it goes over to the House. That was a big thing that us at Common Sense were involved with. And then on the ACP side, been a lot happening with this past week with ACP, which the House companion legislation to the Senator Lujan's bill was introduced by Representatives Bazitsky and Kerry. I think there was in total 12. It was by bipartisan co-sponsors. So that was introduced. And then just yesterday during the Senate Commerce Markup Committee, there was like 30 bills that were slated for markup. And even though the Senator Welch's ACP Extension Act was not on the markup up, and it ended up getting amended and tacked on to Senator Cantwell's Plan for Broadband Act. So that passed out of committee, and in addition to the Plan for Broadband Act, it includes funding for Rip and Replace, which is funded by Spectrum auctions of AWS3, and then the 7 billion extension for ACP.
Brenna, you might just quickly explain what Rip and Replace is quickly.
Yeah, Rip and Replace is a program that essentially wants to rip out and replace the physical infrastructure that is associated with companies in China. So it's considered like it's a big national security thing. A lot of Republicans are very supportive of it, but it's been underfunded for what they had intended to like fully rip out the physical infrastructure that was supported by those Chinese companies. So in like the political sense, Republicans wanted Rip and Replace funding. Democrats wanted ACP. I'm being very simplistic with it, but and so they came together and got both of those things onto the bill. So the final bill that got passed out of committee does not include though the it doesn't include the pay for that's needed for ACP, so it's still unfunded. So that'll have to be something that is addressed, and then the eligibility changes were not included. At least
and devices and the devices.
Yeah, so the devices are still included. That was a thing that was like a sticking point or like a negotiation tactic to get more Republicans on board, was cutting the device support and also reducing the income threshold from 200% to 135% of the poverty line. So we'll have to see kind of what plays out, because we kind of have like a Frankenstein version of it right now.
Okay. Elena, do you have anything you want to add?
No, it was a busy week for sure. And obviously just passing out of the committee doesn't, full Congress has to still pass the bill. Biden has to still sign it into law. So there's a long way to go. However, this is probably the most optimistic or positive action that has been taken around ACP in the last couple of months. So, if one, none of the Arizona, this is the other thing that kind of bugs me, but none of the Arizona senators or none of the Arizona congressional leaders are sponsors of the bill. And so I think that actually says a lot. And the work that needs to be done here in Arizona around digital equity. So I just point that out, because obviously it's a bipartisan, bill, and there's lots of people on board from both sides of the aisle. However, nobody really from Arizona. So if you have an in with your congressperson, you might want to give them a call.
We need to move on. Anything
else? Steve, this is
Yeah,
Mark.
go ahead,
Just
Mark.
briefly, my understanding of the Senate bill is it does lower the threshold from 150% to maybe 135% of the poverty level. So that means quite a number of people that did qualify for ACP of the 23 million, some percentage of them would not be eligible based on an income threshold that is different.
Is that the right number, Brenna, or is it 200?
Yeah. So other bills, Senator Cantwell's Spectrum bill and Senator Lujan's ACP bill, those had eligibility changes going from 200%, which is what it currently is, of the federal poverty line to 135%, which aligns with Lifeline. But the Senator Welch's bill, which is what was included on the Plan for Broadband Act yesterday, is just a clean extension. Just $7
Thank you.
authorized, no changes.
No changes.
Thank you. Good to know.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, we need to move on. Thank you very much. And so let's get to our program. And Denise, I apologize that we're running so late, but because I know you got lots to talk about. So I'm very excited to introduce Denise Atkinson Shorey, who's president of eLuminosity. And I had a great opportunity to meet with her and some of the folks who are her other folks who are on the call today. And they are doing some really amazing work. And I know they're working with the city of Tucson and others, which is how I actually met her. So she's going to talk, they're going to talk about designing for broadband and digital equity. And with that, Denise, I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you. And if you need to share, I will stop sharing. So.
And I've got this thing to share, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to quickly turn it over to Michael Brennan, who is with the Brennan Group. We are a team that work together and working on what's the broadband program in Tucson. And you're going to learn more about that on the 29th. So we're going to talk a bit more about designing for broadband and digital equity, which the first half of today has been talking about the kinds of opportunities that are available. A lot of you may have already written and worked with grants, but we think that if we kind of cover a number of things that are important when you begin the granting process, and we thought we'd point out some things today, and we'd start with Michael, and I'm going to turn everything over to you from here.
Yeah, thanks, Denise. And yeah, it's been an interesting morning. I had a little bit of a security issue, and I have fires. I live on the Denver Front Range. We have a fire to the north of us and a fire to the south of it. But other than that, it's been a great morning. But anyways, let me introduce the team to you. If you could go on to our team slide, Randy.
Okay, it should be showing.
Okay, great. My name's Mike Brennan. I'm currently working for Fletcher McCusker at the TCC. I've been in there for about 3 years. And for those, we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And I think the reason we're going to talk about that, a lot of what we went through at the TCC, there's some lessons learned there for
Michael, if I can interrupt, you might want to just talk about what is the TCC, because there's a lot of people who are not here, are not from Tucson, and won't know who Fletcher McCusker is either.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Fletcher McCusker is the CEO and chairman of Rio Nuevo. It's a state-run district that promotes business in Tucson. And they also are very keen to digital equity. So it's a group that helps out the city of Tucson and has a strong relationship between the two. So anyway, I've been a consultant in there for 3 years. Started out doing a technology study for Fletcher at the TCC. And I've been in there 3 years, coaching, counseling, so on and so forth. Fletcher on not only technology, but a business model in order to make that one of the premier sites in the country. But anyways, my background a little bit with is that I used to run NCR's maintenance program for networking on a global basis in 140 countries. It was a $600 million business. We supported Cisco products and a number of others. Then I went on and did a couple of startups, systems integration, so on and so forth, sold them, did some consulting for Extreme Networks, done some work for Avaya Corporation, Cisco, and others. So I pretty much know that side of the industry and have done a few startups on my own. I've been in the business 38 years, so I have a lot of technical and business experience. My main focus is on business planning, development, strategic and tactical planning, and looking for project funding in interesting areas, in creative areas. I'll leave it at that. My partner, Randy, Randy Lunig, is with Broadband Toolkit Company, and Randy has a unique background. He's a engineering, has engineering degrees from Duke and Cornell, but he also has an MBA from Wharton. So I needed a person on our team that frankly could do broadband analytics and data mining beyond what your typical GIS person could do. And we take in data that supports BEAD economic modeling, not only from the federal tools that you can get, but from other tools. And from other sources that we're going to talk about today. Randy's been in the business for about 40 years. So even though he looks younger than I am, he's maybe a little bit older.
Skin cream.
That owner comes from a company, Co-Create Everything. Sal is from Mexican descent. He's got a big heart as far as the broadband equity strategy and collaborative planning. He's been in the business about 31 years, and he has extensive knowledge in strategic planning and digital equity programs at the state, county, and city levels. And he's a graduate of not only CSU, but some Mexican and Spanish schools. So he brings a great deal of technical and business expertise. Denise has been in the business 25 years, although I don't know, Denise, that might be a little bit longer. But she has a lot of federal, state, county, and city broadband expertise. She's led a lot of broadband advocacy groups and policy groups, a lot of experience in the school systems, statewide and all around the country. And she's been authored, awarded, and implemented over $100 million grant to schools and libraries across the country. So we needed this type of a team. And the reason we got this team together is because, frankly, a lot of cities and counties are having trouble, not because they don't have the skill sets, that they don't have enough skill sets, and they don't go deep enough to run their own broadband programs. So that's the team that we've put together. Randy, you want to go on to the next slide?
Yeah.
So you may be wondering why I put this slide up there and why is the TCC relevant? And Randy, go on to the next slide here. The TCC has been around for about 35 years now. It was not well received. It's about a 32-acre site that was put in the middle of Tucson. They actually knocked down the Bowery section of Tucson, and the Mexican community and the Chinese community didn't like it very much. So they put up this building, did not get a lot of local support, and they put it up without a lot of technology. 10 years ago, a lot of people, frankly, wanted it knocked down. There wasn't enough technology in it. It was getting worn. And Schwame Associates, which is an architectural firm, got involved from just sprucing it up. But one of the things they forgot to do was to put any technology into that particular facility. So I want to go to the next slide, Randy.
Okay.
So one of the things that we thought this was when Fletcher initially brought me in there was to do, a gap analysis on what this needed to be competitive with other, convention centers across the country. So it was lacking in 18 different technological areas, including broadband, a lot of the networking, so on and so forth, where it couldn't be competitive on a national basis. So Fletcher asked me to basically say, okay, what we want to do is set a vision for this, and we want to see what it's going to take to put the technology into this center to make it a viable place where businesses and all sorts of folks want to come in and hold their events. What we found out, that was really expensive. It cost millions and millions of dollars. And, basically the city in Rio Nuevo said they didn't have the money. But Fletcher and I got together and we said, well, maybe there's another way of doing this. So we pursued a private and public partner program that's where we're going to go forward, and I contacted 40 world-class vendors. And what we did was I personally got on the phone with them, told them of our vision of wanting this to be a world-class tier 2 convention center. And we started talking to these folks. We brought them into one room. We put together a committee with both the city and Rio Nuevo, consisting of the mayor, city manager, CIO, and a lot of the other departments. And we said, okay, this is what we want to be when we grow up. How are you guys going to help us? So we worked with them on an individual basis, had them all in the room at the same time, which was pretty uncomfortable, a lot of them. The mayor got up and spoke and basically said, this is what we want to be when we grow up. And we sat down and we encouraged them to partner with us on not on a vendor relationship, but on a long-term basis.
Mike, can you wrap up so the rest of us can talk?
Yeah. So,
okay, thank you.
So basically, what we were doing was saying, okay, we want a 10-year plus relationship, and we don't want a vendor relationship, and we want to win for the vendors as well as the city. So, anyways, the result of that was getting 3 main vendors, and those vendors are now on 10-year contracts, on performance-based contracts, and we put very little capital down, and we have a joint P&L. And we think as a team, we can do the same type of thing in this particular space with the broadband industry. Randy, do you want to go from there?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Yeah, so each of us brings kind of a different toolkit, if you will. So I'm going to say just in 2 or 3 slides a bit about broadband analytics, and basically our mission as an organization is to encourage people at every level in the industry, whether they're government or investors or others, to be data driven in their decisions. So this is a slide with dust particles that represent the unserved and underserved, and the kinds of questions that people are asking. Oftentimes a city, county, state will ask for a gap analysis. And an investor or an ISP might call it an opportunity assessment. Someone who's deploying infrastructure will often be very, do a very detailed competitive analysis. We have a lot of people who, come to us and say, I've got $100 million. I'd like to put it into fiber infrastructure, and I'm willing to deploy anywhere in the country. Where should I go? And so we have tools and analytics that do that. And we're doing a lot of work, which is what we're trying to unpack today in, digital equity analytics. And as I think Aaron and Nicole noted, and others, the competitive the no vote for the competitive grant just dropped, and so there's a lot of energy behind that, and we'll show you in a moment a bunch of resources for that. But basically, when you think about digital equity analytics, with the Digital Equity Act, you've got 8 different categories of inputs that lead to a concept called covered population. You've got POPs, households, housing units, a bunch of income metrics, things like SNAP that are often great indicators of how well someone's doing, and then tons of data on devices and connectivity, ethnicity and morality. So that all comes into the equation. Just very quickly, sort of stepping back, when a town or a city or state ask the question, how are we doing in terms of connectivity? There are basically 3 sources of truth that jump out. Oftentimes the focus has been on data reported by ISPs, and this was Form 477 or the BDC today, in a whole bunch of forms. Separately, though, there's tons of data that is survey based. The American Community Survey, if you look at all the crosstabs and geographies, you've got close to 500,000 permutations of data sets that are possible. They're not all included, tons of stuff there. And then crowdsourced data. And this is sort of just a quick snapshot of what it looks like. On the left, you've got something showing layers of technology and coverage by geographic presence. In the middle, a snapshot of device ownership. In the right, a piece that shows what you can do with crowdsource. And this is, by the way, is probably 100 or 1,000 times more granular than what you'll see in a downloaded FCC report. This is we wrote a white paper with UCLA, and here we're filtering their highest resolution data set and resolving to the location and then building up. So very sophisticated kind of stuff. So for the Digital Equity Act, this is just a super quick snapshot. This is an example of one of probably 150 relevant data layers. This is covered population. And for instance, if someone lives in Glendale, as an example, so this is obviously the Phoenix area, but lives in Glendale, 95 or 96% of the population is covered population. To pursue the competitive grant, you would then want to unpack into each of the layers. And so we've got tools to do that, and we're doing that kind of stuff. So this is sort of my last slide here, just to give you a picture of how I think every city or town should think about things. Is if you're deploying a fiber infrastructure, and it may be that you're just planning the city, it could be that you're doing muni broadband, a la Gigi Sohn, and she's your speaker next week. Basically, there's a bunch of inputs that you want to have on the left-hand side. And this includes looking at the density of units or locations, per mile on your fiber, thinking about, buried versus aerial, boring, trenching, micro trenching, converting that into dollars per mile, looking at fiber architectures, looking at drivers of adoption, which has a huge impact on the business case, looking at capital sources. This all flows into a financial model, and what comes out are a bunch of standard metrics, your maximum negative cash flow, your EBIT, EBITDA, so forth, and then most importantly, an ability to run sensitivities. So if you're a town or city or county thinking about infrastructure planning, this is a place where you would like to end up. And you should think about this and come up with some questions for Gigi for next week too, because this is a really important topic. So I will now hand over to Denise.
Okay, so E-Luminosity is the group that I work under, and if you go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about, now that you have sort of identified your needs and begun to look at the administrative pieces and it feels a little daunting, let's talk about why we might take a collaborative grant writing approach to pulling your grant together, looking at ways to be more efficient, to be more attractive to your funder. I'm going to have you go to the next page then. We pretty much encourage everyone to look at a strategic grant writing strategy that pulls everyone together, allows for a more robust way to gather match requirements and to meet your percentages that you need. It allows for partnerships to develop, and it allows for the aligning of maximizing your opportunities. So everybody's sort of rowing in the same direction. If you want to go to the next slide. And I see Lucy says she's not seeing slides. So is everybody else not seeing any slides? Okay, good enough. So we just talked about a collaborative grant writing approach and being systemic about looking at the other partnerships that you might pull together. And this is a short slide that outlines how you might begin to do that now. The sooner you can do that, you don't have to do that after the NOFO is out. You can begin to talk and organize and develop and share your missions and understand the pieces and how you're going to set up your organizations and your resources, and begin to identify your solutions and benefits that are collaborative. Go to the next slide, Randy. So once you've got your grant done, we believe that the ecosystem not only is for grant writing, but it is for your broadband. So look at the broadband and the digital equity and consider it one large ecosystem. The more that you do that, the more successful you'll be. I'm going to go to the next slide because I want to leave some time for questions. This is an example of what we've done in the city of Pueblo in Colorado, where we've looked at all of the different pieces and we've looked at all of the different grants and projects and how they all connect together. This is how we're all rowing together in the same boat, and how we're leveraging each other's grants with the FCC, with NTIA, with connecting minority communities, with the public library system, and how we all have worked economic development. We're beginning to work together, and we're beginning to be more successful in getting funding because it's not overlap, it's collaborative. And I'm going to turn this over to Sal to talk some more.
Okay, great. Thanks, Denise. Well, I'm going to go pretty quick because I know we're limited on time. My company, Co-Create, we've been around since 2001. We're a strategic development company where we've worked on numerous initiatives, public and private, work with federal government, state, many philanthropic organizations, and designing and developing initiatives. We work in the equity space for a while now, whether it's health equity, and now how that's evolved into digital equity. So with respect to our approach, really looking at it, how we design strategies, how we design initiatives to be able to hit the mark with respect to looking at an ecosystem approach. So that's how we looked at the work we're doing, and that's how we're going to move forward with the work we're doing. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Real quickly, these are kind of the 4 fundamental areas that we have been focusing on our work in, designing public-private opportunities for broadband, key community solutions to make sure that the community integration work is part of all of that, strategic planning and program development, what that needs to look like on the front end when you begin to design it, and really look at a sustainability approach with respect to strategic granting and build that in on the front end so that this way lost as we move forward, with the implementation of our proposal. We're not sitting there, in year 4 or 5 thinking about how, we're going to be able to live moving forward. And then also a key piece is the project marketing. We need to incorporate within the scope of digital equity and broadband, especially when working with underserved and not served communities. How are we really going to create the messaging to really impact the adoption and integrate and really design the types of digital equity programming that needs to be done to systematically support a broadband implementation. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Our approach to Tucson to this point this is kind of a snapshot, right? With our ecosystem approach with respect to looking at it, we have to look at all the federal components of the ecosystem, the state, the community-based organizations, the providers, and the private world. We have to align that with respect to the covered populations that are identified, and we see that with our recent noteful with the digital equity competitive grant program. The aligning of the programming needs to, of course, fit and target those specific program target populations. We understand that Pima County with Pima Connect has done some tremendous work in that area. We want to be able to go in and align and integrate and be able to move forward in the context of the great work that they've been doing. We have to align and integrate the broadband planning and the digital equity planning that has been done by the Arizona Commerce Authority. Look, of course, Pima Connect, the city, and others, right? And the key to this is being able to move forward with respect to broadband access and with digital equity and inclusion programming to really have an integrated approach to be able to hit the mark, to have the type of impact that we need to with the underserved and not served populations. Next slide. And this is a real snapshot of that, how Randy's talking about the gap coverage analysis with respect to the data. We look at a digital equity analysis and what that means. What does the digital inclusion programming look like? We need to be able to align that so this way we can have the successful outcomes that we need with respect to our movement forward with Tucson or any other community. And finally, a quick snapshot here is something that we've launched with respect to a collaborative, a consortium, whatever you want to call it. But we look at it as kind of an alliance with respect to looking at the overarching digital equity and inclusion vision, really being clear about the digital literacy and devices types of programmatic approach that you need, understanding digital navigation, but taking a systematic approach to digital navigation. In Pueblo, we're launching a digital navigation system. So consequently, it's comprehensive and it's targeting all parts of the community that really need that type of service support. And of course, advocacy. The ACP is gone. We need to be able to maintain our advocacy focus and be able to move forward. Denise talked about the strategic grantings built in, and of course, the broadband access. So quick and dirty, that's kind of what we're doing. And here's an ecosystem approach, the impacts it has. If you take that approach, right, it impacts small business, telemedicine, increase the values of homes. And I believe many of you already understand that, but I believe, designing it on the front end is going to have the type of impact that you need on the back end. And I think we're ready for questions next.
Oh, great. Before we get to that, Ryan is on the call about the grant that they're working on. And I know he's only got a couple minutes, and then we can come back and take any questions or comments. I'm sorry to have to interrupt here, but Ryan, do you want to just take a minute to kind of tell us about the project you're working on?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Steve, for the time. Apologies for interrupting the Q&A. So my name is Ryan Morris. I'm a senior program manager with the ASU College of Global Futures. Long story short, our team is working on an initiative called the Arizona Future Workforce Initiative. It is a grant funded through Jobs for the Future, JFF, and we are in process of applying for phase 3 funding, which is going to be a 2.5-year timeline to ultimately train and place 5,000 Arizonans into quality green jobs. And we've targeted the industries of broadband, advanced manufacturing, and renewable energy. So my team is putting together a employer council with organizations that can support the training and place people into jobs in their industries or in their partners' pipelines, and also with an equity council, which are more like community-based organizations and nonprofits to connect to individuals. The demographics that we're targeting in the state are people without 4-year degrees, people from low-income backgrounds, youth, women, and people in rural communities. So there's a big theme of connecting the smaller counties and the smaller cities to opportunities for economic advancement. So I'm working with Peter Costa at Baltu Technologies, and he was kind enough to introduce me to Steve here. So I've shared some documents with Steve that he's, I believe, going to share out after this that has my contact information. I'll also put my email in the chat. But basically, the ask is if you're, doing similar workforce development or have employers that might have jobs or pathways available for quality careers for individuals, then to please connect with myself and my team, and we'd be happy to plug you and your organization into the work that we have going on here.
Right.
So that's my elevator pitch. Steve, did I miss anything?
You got just a minute. Jonathan, you want to, I see you put a comment about wanting to help.
Absolutely. We've done a lot of work. My previous job at WIA on broadband workforce development. Now I'm working for an employer as jobs in Arizona, TWN Communications. So we'd be interested in working with you on that and finding ways to, through BEAD to get the workforce to be native to Arizona, and get the training in place and get you connected with national resources that are working on the same topic. So my email is in the chain there. So please reach out and let's get on that.
Okay. I got you. I'll send you an email. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, Ryan, this is Bill DiAugustino. I'm supporting WIA at a national level, and I'll follow up with you separately. Jonathan is exactly right. I think there's a lot of synergy that we can help with.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Ryan, I know you and I need to chat offline today, in the next couple of days. I've got some questions and comments and thoughts about others that might want to partner with you. I want to just mention, Ryan, I mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, but you can download the chat. So if you go into the chat at the top, there's 3 ellipses, and you can click on that and you can save the chat. So the contact people who put contact information for you, you can find that in the chat.
Thanks for that.
Steve, I just one quick comment, please.
Sure.
All right, Vaughn Croft here from Fred Giacosa Job Corps Center in Tucson. We always tune into these messages that you just gave us about future employment outlook and projections. So I wrote down your name and the jobs for the future that you mentioned. So I may get in contact with you so we can kind of keep pace with your findings and what you're looking at.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other quick comments? I know Ryan's got to run. He took time away from another meeting to sign in this morning. Any other quick questions or comments for Ryan? If not, I will send out the information and Ryan's contact information and the flyer that he sent me, because it does a really good job of providing an overview.
Thanks so much. I'm gonna hop to my other
Okay.
call. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye,
Thanks for
everybody.
dropping in today. Okay, so if we can go back, Denise, I don't know if you or any of your team has more things, or people want to take questions or comments. Again, I apologize for the break
No.
there.
No, we certainly understand, and we're really actually thank you very much for the time. We have some time for questions. I know we moved through things pretty quickly at talking about setting up your structure right, talking about how to gather data and understand that there's lots of ways to look at and find your data that you need.
Excuse me, Randy, can you stop sharing, please?
Oh, you bet. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then talk a little bit about how you might structure and look at doing your granting and what to look for in a good digital equity program. So that's kind of what we tried to give you. I know that a lot of you have some experience in this area, but we'll hopefully give you a few other tips and pointers that might be helpful as we move forward to the submission on the 23rd for the digital equity competitive grants.
Hey, Denise, maybe let's just mention too that we have a bunch of related presentations in the next to last slide in our deck that I know Steve will send out.
Yeah. So if you find that you want to learn more about collaborative grant writing or data analytics or the economics and how to structure things, we have some presentations we've done, and then you could refer to those as sort of resources.
So Elena, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So I'm wondering, with the September 23rd deadline, how do you build that capacity, build that coalition, do all of the things that were talked about in your presentation, and still, do the lengthy grant application? I just worry we're kind of looking at this, a little too late in the process.
Do you want me to take a shot at that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess with respect to what we have done, we've launched the work that we've done in Southern Colorado back in 2018. So we did that with the intention of understanding where this would go in creating that collaborative environment to be able to move forward. So of course we did have a head start, but I think if with your approach to your strategy for the NOFO, I believe clarifying that's the intent. You may not necessarily have it in place now, but I believe they'll understand that if you are looking at your proposal from an ecosystem approach in and around digital equity and inclusion, that will resonate in a significant way. And you, of course, can build that into your plan. So it could be, number one, you can have parallel paths of one constructing what that ecosystem looks like. Another path with your strategy can be specific things that are done you can do now because you have the assets in place, whether it's digital navigation or literacy programming or whatever it might be. But you can look at a parallel path and maybe say in year 2, we will have a comprehensive consortium or coalition in place to integrate the other components to have a more comprehensive strategy, so that this way, by the end of the year, by the end of the 4th year, 5th year, when you're done, you're building that infrastructure for a comprehensive digital equity and inclusion strategy, which is key because we know that the resources in most cases are not necessarily there in abundance with digital equity. like they are in other areas. So you need to have that infrastructure to look forward and to be able to look at a sustainable approach to your work. So that might be something we can look at. I mean, like for we're right there with everybody else, right? We're dissecting the NOFO. We're probably going to have to be working with, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 communities or maybe more. So it's really understanding the context of where you are, where you want to be, and really clarifying that.
Any other questions or comments?
Maybe I could say too, just the analytics that would be supportive of this is all, you know, readily available, and we could support with that sort of immediately if there are people who are pursuing grants.
One of the key things, like, you know, Randy, we started doing some work together. I don't know, what's about 5 months now, Randy.
Yeah.
And we had created a pretty good environment in Pueblo with respect to a systematic, comprehensive approach to broadband and digital equity, right? But we only had the data that was available to us from NTIA, the Connecting Minority Communities portal, that really clarified what are the eligible census tracts within the context of their funding. We didn't have the robust data, for example, that Randy has. So now we have integrating that, and now we have a better story to tell with respect to this is what our data looked like in respect to our support our programming. And it was in the fall of 2021. Now look what we got. We got a really interesting story in and around digital equity, because we can really go deep with respect to those covered populations and know exactly where they are, how they're related to the program. And then this way now we can create innovative programmatic approaches that we go forward because we have that data.
We've even, like in Pueblo, we even had some programs where the data says, you know, your serving institution needs to be within these 2 city blocks. You know, it's having precise data is immensely valuable.
Are there any other questions?
Any other questions or comments from anybody? Okay, well, thank you, Denise, and your team. We appreciate you guys being here this morning. I'm sorry we kind of got it short here.
That's okay.
As you can see, we had lots of stuff to talk about. It's the Fed's fault. They're making all kinds of things happen.
Yep.
I guess good or bad. Good, bad. They keep calling it the good, bad, and ugly. You remember that movie?
No, thank you very much for having us. And if you're at Mountain Connect, look us up. And if not, we'll be in the Tucson area as well. And attend the session on the 29th to learn a little bit more about what Arizona's doing or what Tucson's doing.
So sounds like a plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we're done. We're done. I'm going to stop the recording, and if anybody, as you know, we do chatting afterwards, kibitzing with colleagues. So if anybody wants to stay online and chat, or if not, we are done for today. Thank you all.